What happens to Hollywood's brightest stars when the lights fade, when the applause stops, and the cameras turn away? Fame promises immortality, but in truth, it can vanish faster than the flashbulb of a paparazzi camera. Some golden age actors once ruled the screen, adored by millions, only to leave this world in silence, alone, overlooked, forgotten. Their stories aren't told in studio press releases, but in whispers and shadows. Stay close, because you're about to discover Hollywood's most haunting endings. Lupe Velez. She was the spark of the 1930s, the woman they called the Mexican Spitfire. Lupe Velez was a force of nature, wildly funny, explosively charming, impossible to ignore. When she danced across the screen in films like The Girl from Mexico, she stole the spotlight from everyone around her. Velez wasn't just acting, she was living, burning, dazzling. But Hollywood has a short memory. As the 1940s rolled on, Velez's star dimmed. The big roles dried up, the press moved on, and the glamorous parties gave way to smaller stages, smaller budgets, and smaller headlines. She had been a household name, but now she was yesterday's news. Did you know Velez was once romantically linked to Gary Cooper and Johnny Weissmuller? She was a tabloid favorite, the firecracker who kept reporters busy with her passionate romances and fiery personality. Yet even the press that once adored her moved on when the box office no longer rang with her name. By 1944, she was just 36 years old, her best years already behind her. Her final film appearances were forgettable, a pale echo of the glory days when audiences lined up just to see her smile. When she passed, it wasn't on a grand stage or in the embrace of admirers. It was in silence, her death clouded by rumors that overshadowed the truth of her talent. For decades, her name was mentioned more in gossip than in appreciation. The tragedy of Lupe Velez isn't that she burned bright, it's that Hollywood let her flame flicker out without care. She broke barriers as one of the first Latina stars in American cinema. But history reduced her to whispers instead of honoring her as a trailblazer. The Mexican Spitfire was a comet, blazing, unforgettable, and gone far too soon. Wallace Reed. Before Cary Grant, before Clark Gable, there was Wallace Reed. He was Hollywood's first true matinee idol, the kind of leading man whose face filled movie palaces and whose name alone could sell out a theater. Studios called him the screen's most perfect lover, and audiences agreed. He was tall, handsome, athletic, the prototype of the modern movie star. Reed was more than a pretty face. He was also ambitious, working behind the camera as a writer and director, determined to shape his career in an industry still inventing itself. By the 1910s, he was a household name, starring in silent hits like The Roaring Road and The Affairs of Anatole. His charisma practically leapt off the screen. But the golden age was anything but golden for those caught in the machine. In 1919, while filming in Oregon, Reed suffered a serious injury in a train accident. Doctors prescribed him morphine to manage the pain. What began as treatment became dependency, and what began as dependency became something darker. Did you know the studio system, desperate to keep him working, reportedly encouraged Reed to keep taking the drugs just so he could make it through grueling shoots? Hollywood didn't care about his health. It cared about his box office draw. By the early 1920s, Reed was visibly struggling. Once the picture of vitality, he grew gaunt and weary. His films still sold, but whispers spread. And then, in 1923, at just 31 years old, Wallace Reed was gone. His death shocked fans, but left the industry cold. The studios moved on, and the man who had once embodied the glamour of silent film was buried beneath the very system he helped build. Even in death, Reed's story was twisted into cautionary propaganda. His widow toured with a film called Human Wreckage, a melodrama warning of the dangers of addiction. Reed's legacy wasn't his artistry, his ambition, or his charm. It was reduced to a moral lesson. Wallace Reed should have been remembered as Hollywood's first great romantic hero. Instead, he became Hollywood's first great tragedy, a man who gave everything to the screen and was left to die in silence. Barbara Payton. In the late 1940s, Barbara Payton seemed destined for the top. She had the looks, the talent, and that ineffable screen presence that made casting directors lean forward and audiences fall silent. Signed to Warner Brothers, she was quickly paired with giants James Cagney in Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye, Gary Cooper in Dallas. Critics whispered she had the stuff of legends. For a moment, Barbara Payton wasn't just a rising star, she was the future of Hollywood. But Hollywood futures don't always play out like the screenwriters imagine. Peyton had a reputation for living as fiercely as she acted. She was glamorous, yes, but also restless, rebellious. Tabloids adored her, splashing her romances across front pages. Her highly publicized relationships, including a volatile triangle involving actors Tom Neal and Franchot Tone, kept her in the headlines even when her films slipped out of theaters. Did you know her relationship with Tom Neal ended in one of Hollywood's most infamous scandals? Neal, jealous over Peyton's continued involvement with Tone, assaulted him so brutally that Tone required hospitalization. The incident, splashed across every paper in America, tainted Peyton's career beyond repair. She wasn't just the rising actress anymore. She was the center of a Hollywood scandal the studios wanted to forget. By the mid-1950s, offers evaporated. Once courted by Warner Brothers, she was now relegated to cheap B pictures and independent productions, her stardom reduced to a shadow of what it had been. By the end of the decade, even those roles were gone. The next act of her life played out not on a movie screen, but in tabloids and whispers. Peyton struggled with poverty, legal troubles, and a fading public fascinated more by her downfall than her work. In 1963, she even published a memoir, I Am Not Ashamed, an unflinching look at her rise and fall. But by then, Hollywood had already turned its back. In 1967, at just 39 years old, Barbara Payton died penniless in a rundown apartment in Los Angeles. No studios mourned, no memorials filled the papers. The woman once poised to rival Hollywood's greatest names passed into obscurity, her brilliance eclipsed by scandal. Barbara Payton's story is the ultimate noir. Beauty, promise, downfall. A star who had everything, then nothing, forgotten by the town that once promised her the world. John Gilbert. Before Clark Gable, before Cary Grant, there was John Gilbert, the great lover of the silent screen. In the 1920s, he wasn't just a star, he was the star. Studios called him Valentino's heir, the matinee idol with smoldering eyes and a presence that melted audiences in films like Flesh and the Devil and The Merry Widow. Women swooned, men envied him, and Hollywood crowned him royalty. But if fame is a spotlight, it can also be a trap. The arrival of talking pictures changed everything. Silent actors who once commanded theaters suddenly had to prove their voices matched their faces. Rumors spread that Gilbert's voice, higher, lighter than his image suggested, didn't fit the great lover persona he had built. Some historians argue his downfall wasn't about his voice at all, but about clashes with powerful executives, including studio head Louis B. Mayer. Whatever the reason, by the early 1930s, John Gilbert was being pushed aside. Did you know he reportedly married 4 times and was romantically linked to Greta Garbo, who left him at the altar? Their relationship was the stuff of legend, an off-screen romance as intoxicating as any film reel. But even Garbo, still thriving in the sound era, couldn't save Gilbert from Hollywood's indifference. By the mid-1930s, the man once hailed as Valentino's successor was struggling to get cast. MGM had sidelined him, roles disappeared, and the box office no longer cared. He tried comebacks, small parts, desperate attempts, but the magic was gone. The industry that had built him now ignored him. Off-screen, Gilbert turned inward. His health declined, worsened by years of personal battles and isolation. On January 9, 1936, he died of a heart attack at just 38 years old. There was no grand Hollywood farewell, no golden tribute for the man who had once been its most bankable idol. The tragedy of John Gilbert isn't just that he died young. It's that the town that once adored him pretended he never existed. He had been the king of the silent era, and yet, when the talkies came, Hollywood erased him from its story. John Gilbert should be remembered as one of the great romantic figures of cinema. Instead, he became a ghost of the silent age, famous one moment, forgotten the next. Marie Prévost. In the 1920s, Marie Prévost was everywhere. With her lively charm and sparkling beauty, she was one of the brightest stars of the silent era. Discovered by Max Sennett, she quickly became one of his famous bathing beauties, and from there, her career soared. Studios loved her, audiences adored her, and she lit up films like The Marriage Circle and The Waning Sex. Prévost had it all: youth, talent, charisma. For a while, she even seemed unstoppable. But Hollywood's love affair with stars is rarely forever. As the 1930s arrived, the industry shifted. Sound pictures demanded new types of actors, new kinds of voices. Younger faces appeared on the scene. And suddenly, Prévost wasn't the ingenue anymore. She was yesterday's news. She struggled with personal setbacks and professional rejection. Offers dwindled. Her glamorous lifestyle crumbled, replaced with quiet desperation. And like so many of her contemporaries, she had no safety net. The studios didn't look after their forgotten stars. When the spotlight moved on, it left nothing but shadows. Did you know Billy Wilder, the legendary director, once worked as a reporter and covered Prevost's tragic end? He never forgot it, later weaving her story into his biting Hollywood satire Sunset Boulevard. The character of Norma Desmond, faded, bitter, forgotten, was born partly out of stars like Marie Prevost. By 1937, Prevost was living in near poverty, scraping by on minor roles and meager paychecks. On January 21st of that year, she passed away in her small Los Angeles apartment at just 38 years old. Days went by before she was discovered. Her death shocked those who still remembered her. But for most of Hollywood, she was already a memory. Her name became a cautionary tale whispered among actors about how quickly fortunes could turn, about how little the industry cared once you weren't profitable. Marie Prevost's life was proof that stardom can dazzle, but it cannot protect. She had danced, laughed, and glittered across silent screens, only to die alone, her once bright fame extinguished in silence. She should have been remembered as one of Hollywood's first great comedians. Instead, she became a warning that in Tinseltown, one day you're golden, and the next, you're gone. George Reeves. For millions of children in the 1950s, George Reeves was Superman, with his square jaw, warm smile, and cape fluttering against black and white skies. He embodied the Man of Steel on television's Adventures of Superman. To young audiences, he was larger than life, invincible, immortal. But off-screen, George Reeves was just a man. And like many Golden Age actors, the reality was far lonelier than the legend. Before donning the cape, Reeves had tasted Hollywood success. He appeared in Gone with the Wind. Yes, he's in there. Look closely. And starred in dozens of films throughout the 1940s. Yet by the time television came calling, his career had stalled. The Superman role revived him, but it also trapped him. Did you know Reeves once said he feared being typecast forever as Superman? Was that the very role that gave him fame? The same role that limited his future? Casting directors couldn't see past the cape. Producers wanted Superman, not George Reeves. For a serious actor, it was both a blessing and a curse. As the series ended, work dried up. Reeves found himself pigeonholed, struggling to break free. To the public, he was a hero. To Hollywood, he was expendable. Behind the smile of Superman was a man watching his career slip away. Then came the summer of 1959. Reeves was found dead in his Los Angeles home at the age of 45. Officially, it was ruled a suicide, but whispers immediately filled the town. Some believed foul play, others pointed to depression, and still others suggested Hollywood's darker undercurrents were involved. To this day, his death remains a cloud of speculation. But the greater tragedy? How quickly Hollywood moved on. The man who had been a household name was quietly buried, his final years overshadowed by typecasting, frustration, and mystery. Superman had saved countless lives on screen, but no one had been there to save George Reeves. Reeves's story is the ultimate paradox. A man who played the strongest figure in American pop culture, yet who died isolated, forgotten by the system that had once celebrated him. In Hollywood, even heroes can fade away. Hattie McDaniel. In 1940, history was made. At the Academy Awards, Hattie McDaniel walked to the stage in a pale blue gown and gardenias in her hair. She accepted the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. She was the first black performer ever to win. The crowd applauded. History applauded. For a moment, McDaniel stood where no one before her had stood. But Hollywood's applause is fickle. McDaniel had carved a career from roles often limited by stereotype, maids, cooks, domestics, yet she infused them with such presence, such warmth, such wit, that she transcended the confines of the scripts. She worked tirelessly, appearing in over 300 films, though often uncredited. Winning the Oscar should have been her ticket to bigger, better roles. Instead, the doors remained shut. Did you know that even the night she won her Oscar, McDaniel wasn't allowed to sit with her co-stars at the Ambassador Hotel? Segregation laws forced her to sit at a separate table in the back of the room. Hollywood applauded her talent but refused to treat her as an equal. After Gone with the Wind, her career faltered. Studios typecast her, refusing to see beyond the maid uniform she had long been given. Work dwindled. The very system she helped break open for others quietly pushed her aside. In her later years, McDaniel turned to radio and television, starring in The Beulah Show. But even that was met with controversy, criticized for reinforcing stereotypes. She found herself caught between two worlds, celebrated as a pioneer, dismissed as a caricature. In 1952, Hattie McDaniel passed away at the age of 57, her health broken, her fortune gone. Hollywood gave little fanfare to the loss of a woman who had made history. For decades, even her final wish to be buried in Hollywood Cemetery was denied because of her race. Hattie McDaniel's story is one of bittersweet triumph. A woman who broke barriers, shattered ceilings, and carved her name into Oscar history, only to die in quiet obscurity, forgotten by the industry that should have cherished her. She should have been the queen of Hollywood. Instead, she became a pioneer, remembered more by history books than by the town she helped change. Ramon Novarro. In the 1920s, before sound revolutionized Hollywood, one man reigned as the rival to Valentino, Ramon Novarro. With his sculpted features, soulful eyes, and exotic appeal, he was branded the Latin lover. Studios sold him as romantic perfection. Audiences swooned. His role in Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, 1925, cemented him as one of the silent era's biggest box office stars. Novarro wasn't just another pretty face. Born in Mexico, he fought his way into Hollywood at a time when the industry rarely embraced actors of Latin heritage. He became MGM's top leading man after Valentino's sudden death, stepping into roles that made him an international icon. But the transition to sound, as always, reshuffled the deck. While Novarro's voice carried well enough, his career never matched the same heights. Younger actors, fresher faces, and shifting tastes pushed him out of the spotlight. By the 1930s, his reign was over. Did you know Novarro was once considered for Gone with the Wind? He was rumored to have wanted the role of Rhett Butler, but producers dismissed him as yesterday's star. That single rejection symbolized the industry's new attitude. Novarro's time had passed. By the 1940s, he was reduced to bit parts and guest appearances. The lavish lifestyle he had once enjoyed crumbled into obscurity. He lived alone in a modest house, his stardom reduced to fading photographs and fading memories. The town that once adored him now barely remembered his name. The final act of Novarro's story turned especially tragic. In 1968, at the age of 69, he was found dead in his Los Angeles home under circumstances that shocked the public. Headlines sensationalized his passing, reducing a pioneering actor to scandal fodder. But the greater tragedy was this. Ramon Novarro, once MGM's crown jewel, died alone, long forgotten by the studios he had enriched and the audiences he had enthralled. His name, once carved on marquees and glowing lights, was now a footnote in Hollywood history. Novarro should be remembered as a trailblazer, a Mexican actor who conquered the silent screen and proved that charisma could transcend barriers. Instead, his story ended in obscurity, his stardom fading into the shadows of Tinseltown's forgotten past. Virginia Rappe. She should have been remembered as a promising actress, a starlet with a future in the glimmering world of silent cinema. Instead, Virginia Rappe's name became forever linked to scandal, her legacy twisted into something she never lived to control. Born in 1891, Rappe was striking, independent, and ambitious. She began her career as a fashion model before making her way into silent films, appearing in shorts like Paradise Garden alongside matinee idol Harold Lockwood. By the late 1910s, she had carved a niche in Hollywood, admired for her beauty and presence. She wasn't yet a household name, but she was climbing one role at a time. But fate and the cruel machinery of gossip had other plans. In September 1921, Virginia attended a party at the San Francisco hotel suite of comedy giant Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. Days later, she fell gravely ill and died. She was only 30 years old. What should have been an investigation into a young woman's untimely passing quickly spiraled into one of Hollywood's first true scandals. Arbuckle was accused of causing her death, and though he was eventually acquitted after 3 trials, Rappe's name was dragged mercilessly through the mud. Did you know that during those trials, prosecutors and tabloids painted Virginia not as a victim, but as a woman of questionable morals, despite little evidence to back those claims? She wasn't remembered for her talent or her rising career, but for the scandal that followed her death. Arbuckle's acquittal dominated headlines, while Virginia was reduced to a footnote, her humanity lost in the circus of the trial. The tragedy is not just that she died young, but that her career and legacy were stolen from her. Instead of being remembered as a hard-working actress on the rise, she became a cautionary tale twisted by Hollywood rumor mills. Virginia Rapp deserved a brighter spotlight. She deserved to be remembered for the life she lived, not the scandal that consumed her after death. Instead, she became one of Hollywood's earliest forgotten figures, buried beneath headlines, whispers, and the shadow of a story that wasn't hers to tell. In the end, Virginia's story is proof that in Hollywood, even the dead aren't safe from being rewritten. Frances Farmer. In the 1930s, Frances Farmer was hailed as one of Hollywood's most luminous rising stars. With her striking beauty and fiery intelligence, she was cast as the next great leading lady. Critics compared her to Katharine Hepburn, and audiences fell under her spell in films like Come and Get It and Son of Fury. For a moment, it seemed Frances Farmer would carve out a legendary career. But Frances was no ordinary starlet. She was outspoken, rebellious, and unwilling to play by Hollywood's rules. She criticized the studio system, rejected publicity stunts, and demanded roles with substance rather than glamour. In an industry that thrived on control, Farmer became a problem, and Hollywood doesn't forgive problems. As the 1940s dawned, her career unraveled. She clashed with producers, and her independent spirit collided with the rigid studio contracts that dictated every move of an actor's life. Arrests, legal battles, and highly publicized struggles followed. Instead of being celebrated for her talent, she was branded as difficult and unmanageable. Did you know that Farmer was institutionalized for years during the height of her troubles? The brilliant actress who once graced red carpets was now confined behind hospital walls, her career and reputation shattered. Rumors, many exaggerated or outright false, spread about her treatment, further burying her Hollywood legacy under sensationalism. When she was released, the industry had moved on. Attempts at comebacks fizzled. The studios that once courted her brilliance now turned away. By the time the 1950s and 1960s rolled in, Farmer was living quietly, far from the dazzling promise of her early career. In 1970, at just 56 years old, Frances Farmer died of cancer. There were no grand Hollywood tributes, no studio memorials, no golden spotlight cast on her memory. She passed in relative obscurity, her name kept alive more by myths and tragic whispers than by the films she left behind. Frances Farmer should have been one of the greats, a star remembered for her artistry and strength. Instead, she became a symbol of Hollywood's cruelty, a cautionary tale of how the dream factory can devour its brightest lights. Her story lingers like a beautiful, defiant, and unfinished. So, there they are, 10 stars who once lit up Hollywood's skies, only to fade into silence, alone and overlooked. Lupe Velez, Wallace Reed, Barbara Payton, Frances Farmer, each a reminder that in Tinseltown, fame is a flicker, not a flame. Which of these forgotten stories surprised you most? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. Hit like, subscribe, and join me next time, because the shadows of Hollywood still hold secrets. And I'll be here to tell you everyone.